today we're putting several holidays together, most foremost of which is Reformation Sunday and the celebration of the continual reform of the church. And so anytime you have a reform movement, you always have a thing that you go back to. You know, there's always that guiding principle that you look back at in order to help you to move ahead. Because you can't major in minors, right? When you change things, you have to know what your original purpose is. And so it's a great Sunday to have this story about the greatest commandment. Because love is at the center of everything we do. So today I want to use the word thrive. Thrive. Sometimes on a death certificate, a physician will write cause of death, failure to thrive. And what that is, a euphemism really for gradual decline. And perhaps we could say that about love today in our world. Maybe we could say that about civility today in our nation. That it's failing to thrive. Maybe we could say it about hope or peace or joy. It's failing to thrive. So today, I want to define from the dictionary the word thrive. It says to prosper, to be fortunate or successful. The second is to grow or develop vigorously, to flourish. I always think about Ken Rode when I hear that definition of thrive. He was here every Tuesday morning for Bible study. He would come in the office, he'd ask me how things are going, if there was anything that he could do. And mind you, at the time, he was over 95. And he drove to church. And he said, I want the church to grow and prosper. And that was his line when he came into the office. It's a great stewardship theme, right? What can we do to make the church grow and prosper, to thrive? Now that could be one of those great one-word motivators, right? It sounds like a diet plan, doesn't it? Sounds like a fast-growing plant product. Thrive. I want to thrive and not just survive. And today, I have this little thing here. Why don't you say this with me? I want to thrive, not just survive. I see an awful lot of people. They're just surviving. I see an awful lot of people who don't have that place to go back to help them to go ahead in life with some values that can help them to thrive. And love is that point that we can go back to. The love of God and the love of neighbor, that's the sure center of everything that we do. And if we live out of that intention, we will thrive. I talk to people about best life possible. What is it that can make up a good life? And most of our suffering is because we desire something that we don't have or that we can't have. So a lot of people will say, well, I can't thrive because I don't have this. I can't thrive because I don't have that. But our lesson today says that everyone has available to them the love of God, and everyone here today has the possibility of living a life of love for other people. Got it. It's here. You can thrive. We're not just going to survive. We're going to thrive. So what is the most necessary ingredient for that? Maybe that could be the subtitle in your Bible for this section of the book of Matthew. Matthew 22. And those little subtitles, maybe that could be it. Thrive. What you need to thrive. And what you also need to know is that this passage is not only found in the Gospel of Matthew. And when the Gospels were written, we know pretty certainly that the Gospel of Mark was written first. And if you open up your Bible, you see that there are only 16 chapters in the Gospel of Mark. It was real small. And it was circulated widely for at least 10 years before somebody had the idea. This is not the whole story here. We need to write more. We need to tell about the parables of Jesus. We need to tell about the healings of Jesus. So Matthew and Luke, without probably knowing one another, wrote their own gospel, and they took the gospel of Mark and they expanded it. And when they did, they both kept this great commandment. They both kept this command to love your neighbor as yourself. But they treated it differently. You'll notice in our passage today, Matthew couched it in terms of this struggle that he's having with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. In Mark, it's a little more positive. And in the original version of it, it's seen as someone who is sincerely wanting to know how to live their life. The Gospel of Luke, what is that? What story is that? What biblical story is that? Good Samaritan. So what does Jesus do in the Gospel of Luke? You know, the Gospel of Luke is great because we wouldn't have all of the good parables. We wouldn't have the prodigal son. We wouldn't have the Good Samaritan because it's only in the Gospel of Luke. We thought it was important that we know these things. So what Luke does is he got the parable of the Good Samaritan right after this story because he answers, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And the guy says, and who is my neighbor? And he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And at the end, he says, who was it who proved to be neighbors to the man who was along the street? He illustrated what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Mark began that whole story by Jesus reciting something called the Shema. Does anybody know what the Shema is? The Shema. Yeah. Shema is prayed twice a day by observant Jews. And it goes something like, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. That's the Shema. So Jesus was just reciting something that every Jew of his day already knew and already had as a foundation of their faith. Now, what you may not know is the original Hebrew word for love, the Lord, it means to generate love. To generate love. So Jesus is calling people to generate love, to thrive. Live long and prosper. Who said that? Dr. Spock. Dr. Spock, what was the actor's name? We have the Vulcan sign over here written. There you go. You remember the finger thing? That is a secret sign in Judaism, actually. And he died in 2015, I think. And what was his name, the actor? Leonard Nimoy. He was Jewish. So live long and prosper is the same thing as a Shema. It means to thrive. So Leonard Nimoy, Ken Rhodey, Jesus, they're all in this theme that they want you to thrive. Sounds like Dr. Spock at work right here. And it has carried over in so many ways into our culture. Now think about how people use something like the Shema in their daily lives. There's the checklist manifesto. Has anybody read that new book? It's about surgeons and operating rooms and how you must necessarily have a checklist of things that need to be exactly right before you begin an operation, right? Did you ever go in for an operation and mark X's and little dots all over your body? That's a good thing. It's a checklist manifesto. You have to have that in order to make sure that things go well. If you've been a soldier, you know how many times you have to check your equipment. If you've been an airline pilot, or if you've ever flown in an airplane, you are really grateful that they go through that checklist before you take off. I haven't been using my log for children's sermons. You guys notice that? Kind of put it behind the rail. It's behind the rail there if anybody longingly wants to see the log back there. But people were doing weird things. They were bringing stuff in for me to put on the log. It's got hair. Somebody carved a face in it. It's got all sorts of weird stuff on it. Somebody said, here, this is for the log. And it was a little rubber bandy kind of thing. You know how you have those bracelets that are kind of stamped with a saying? And it was a black band, and it said, check your head. And so I got it on top of it. And I said, where in the world did you get that? And they said, oh, it was on a head of broccoli in the grocery store. And so I brought it. And she said, but I felt it was appropriate. Check your head. Maybe that's what Jesus said after that. The gospel writer just left it out or something. Check your head. Because it's love that gives you the power to thrive. And you might be distracted by some other thing, but twice a day at least, remind yourself of what's important. So 400 years later, St. Augustine came along, and he summarized Christian ethics when he said, love God and do what you want. Now that's a great ethic, right? It's a simple ethic, but it has huge implications because God's love carries over into every part of our life. We used this for the benediction last week. And does anybody remember who William Blake is? William Blake is a poet and an artist. He was popularized by Carl Jung because Carl Jung saw in his paintings and in his poetry something that was essential to our spiritual lives together. And Dan Bourne is here today. Dan, that was a great speech that you gave at the college a few weeks ago on poetry and mysticism. And the words that we speak have the ability to help us to have a transcendent experience of life. So let's read this together. To see a world in a green sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. See, everyday life is holy. Everyday life can be a transcendent moment. Every day in life, if we're mindful of it, can bring us the joy that we hope for. And that's why we say, embracing and celebrating God's love. It's on the wall, too. You can read it on the wall. So today's the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther nailing 95 Theses on the door at Wittenberg and thereby changing history. And so this afternoon at 2 o'clock, I hope you can go to St. Mary's because there'll be a number of us from the ecumenical community that will be participating in a ceremony of unity. And so they've given me a couple minutes to say some things, and so this is what I want to tell them. That the love of God and neighbor is messy, and there are a lot of cracks in it. And many people get tripped up by the cracks. Now, I like Judaism because Judaism doesn't say they're Reformed Judaism. They say they are Reformed Judaism, which means not that, we weren't so good in the past, but now we're reformed and we're okay now. It's to say that we always, in every generation, need to reform the church to make it work for people. And in the United Church of Christ, we have great sayings about that, don't we? Unity and diversity. United and uniting. And that we can accomplish more together than separately. And I'm going to mention the projects that those of us in the Interfaith Partnership have worked on together. This last spring, on Good Friday, we had a vigil down at the square for awareness of the opioid crisis. In today's service, we're holding an offering, and it's going to go toward the rehabilitation process for people who are suffering from addiction. We helped to form the Behind Bars and Beyond. We had campaigns for fair wages, immigration reform, the budget as a moral document, caring for the earth. We raised awareness about the human and the economic costs of war. And at the Worcester Area Interfaith Partnership, I can tell you, we rarely talk about theology. We rarely talk about 95 Theses. Does anybody remember one of them? You remember one, Steve? I can't come up with one. The priesthood of all believers. There you go. I don't know, something like that. And no. The church is not about theology. And it's not good when it is, right? It's not about theology. We talk about, when we gather, how to make life better for everyone in Worcester. How to make the life of our country better. How to make the world a more livable place. And that's what Martin Luther was all about. He had a passion to do things differently because he saw there were so many people who weren't being served by the church as it was. He saw poverty and slavery and a lack of education. John Wesley looked out in England and he saw poverty and slavery and a lack of education. Booth, who founded the Salvation Army, John Calvin, who partially we use his stuff. They were all generated out of a concern for peace and justice and creating a better world for everyone. So the history of the church is not about theology. We shouldn't celebrate theology today. We don't even know what it is. But the history of the church is caring about people, oppressed people, vulnerable people, the least, the last, and the lost, as Jesus said. And what I'm going to say this afternoon is this, that the church is not organized religion. The church is organized compassion. And the church needs to constantly reform in order to generate the love of God in the world. And we all say together the words of the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied." Love is not an action. It's not a theory. It's God's love. And the church needs to be concerned more about thriving than surviving. So what were those four things that we're supposed to love God with? I think we got it. You guys remember this guy? You might remember today's his birthday. Glenn Moyer, will be 96 today. 96. And we had this on Facebook for the church. I put the For All the Saints at the bottom of that. Glenn, every time we would have a funeral together, he would say, "Why didn't we sing For All the Saints?" if it wasn't in the service. Because he loved that as a closing hymn, because it gave him power. Wow. It has things like, "Ringed by the cloud of witnesses divine, we feebly struggle, they in glory shine. Yet in your love our faithful lives entwine." And we are more powerful together than we are apart. I was sitting next to John Schlup at a funeral. You'll appreciate this. You know John Schlup. In Akron. One of our clergy passed away, and we were there in Akron. And we were singing this song, For All the Saints. You guys know that song, For All the Saints? Very powerful song. John Schlup turned to me, and he said, "Man, I feel right now like I could run right through that wall." And I said, "Well, don't try it right now." But I want to tell you to grab hold of love. And there's a reason why we have embracing and celebrating God's love on that wall out there. Because if you don't have a vision for how your life can thrive, find it. And you'll be able to find it anywhere. You'll be able to find it no matter what your resources. You will be able to find it this Thursday at the Sauerkraut Supper if you look for it. It'll be there. If your intention is to love God with everything that you have, you will experience it in this worship this morning. if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. God is present in this moment. So thrive. Join the cloud. All these people do this. Go out, generate love, and share the love. Let's read this responsively as we close. Jesus answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind.
This is the first and most important command.
And the second command is like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself.